Everybody. Um, my name is Katzelnick. I am a graduate of the Tech Academy. I graduated back in the fall of 2020. I went through the full stack software developer bootcamp, and I currently work for Amazon. I work in their advertising organization, which is based out of New York City. Um, and I wanted to do a session today on technical interviews, what to expect, what my experience was like, and just some general information about how to apply what you learn from a school like the Tech Academy, and what you will learn and you would learn in the field, and how that all applies to technical interviews. So I do have a kind of a generic 15 slide PowerPoint that I'm just gonna kind of utilize to um, just to give us a little bit of just a foundation, but it's going to be more of just talking. I do know that uh, the folks hosting the session will be fielding questions. I also do have a section at the end for questions as well. So if that's all, let's begin. So everyone, my name is Scott Katzelnick. Technically a front-end engineer with with Amazon. They have two engineering roles. They have SDE and FEE. SDE, software development engineer, and front-end engineer. The main difference is a front-end engineer will work mostly within front-end technologies. But in actuality, what I've come to realize is the front-end engineer is the full stack developer role at Amazon, where the SDE role might also work sometimes in front end, but will have more of a focus on back end and infrastructure in general. That's what I've noticed working in the advertising organization anyway, and what I hear from folks that I know in AWS. So I'm currently based out of New York City, where Amazon Advertising is based out of. That's JFK 19, the building that I work out of 3 days a week out of the city. And I worked for Amazon for a little under 2 years. Uh, so, oh, actually, let me do this. I think I skipped one. Let me go back to here. Yeah. So my background. Um, oh yes, agenda for today. Background, interview prep, interviewing, and then summary Q&A. My background, I'm actually a college dropout. I attended two colleges, Northeastern and Rutgers, Boston and New Jersey. Um, out of college, out of high school, I graduated in 2005 and uh, subsequently went and studied at Northeastern. I studied at the time biomedical physics. I was always interested in medicine before switching over to chemistry. And then in 2010, um, on and off with school, I transferred my credits to Rutgers here in Jersey, where I then worked to try to rebuild up some of those lost credits that didn't transfer over until about 2013 before I actually stopped going to school altogether. Worked in other industries. I did work at Apple in their retail stores and Microsoft in their retail stores. So those were retail positions, not corporate positions. And then for 5 years, I was actually a manager. I was an inventory manager for a large supermarket chain here in New Jersey called ShopRite. Um, and this all led me up to 2020. At the time, I had been 5 years as in that manager role, and I was thinking of finishing, getting finished with my pre-med degree, but I knew that I still had a long road ahead of me, and I had to take a hard look at my career in general, and I made kind of a risky decision to stop going to school, to enroll in a boot camp, and work on something that I had a lot more interest in, a greater affinity to, something that I could see myself doing in a career and getting into a lot quicker than my current path at the time in medicine. So that's what led me to TTA. I graduated October of 2020, and by December of 2020, I had an offer from a company called Braille Skateboarding. They're a company based out of California. They have a 6 million subscriber YouTube channel. The owner of Braille, Aaron Cairo, is a professional skateboarder. He owns the YouTube channel, and they wanted to build an app, website, a back end, the full works, to try to teach their user base how to skateboard, to have somewhere to show everybody tricks. This would be a video service. This would handle rich media. This would handle log in, log out subscriptions, in-app purchases for the subscriptions. So I worked at Braille for the course of over the course of 2 years, building up their app, their website, and their back end. And I also, towards the end, the last 6 months, I helped them shape their Shopify store. Shopify has a really rich API, and I helped them build that subscription model directly into their e-commerce Shopify store, which synced back to the custom backend that I had originally built for the app. So no matter where you purchased the app, whether it was the subscription, whether it was the app or the website or in their Shopify store, you would gain access to the app itself. And then around April of 2022, I was just looking around and noticed that Google was doing their early career interviews. For early career, that's 1 to 3 years. And for their L4 position, I believe at Google, for their SWE, their SWE, software engineer. And about a month after that, I was contacted by an Amazon recruiter as well. So I actually did my Amazon and Google interviews over the course of the summer of 2022 in parallel at the same time. I got through the hiring committee at Google, but they went into a hiring freeze during team matching. So I didn't have an offer, so the Google route halted, but Amazon did give me an offer, and I accepted that August 15th of 2022. So that's kind of my background and when I interviewed and how it ties into Braille and TTA. So I wanted to break this down into two main sections: interview prep and interviewing itself. Obviously, both important. But the interview prep is interesting. There's many ways you could approach this, approach interview prep. And at the time, it's not immediately apparent, what type of jobs you may be looking for, right? I mean, who knows? Any one of the FANG companies could reach out to you, or you could end up working at a company that owns a YouTube channel, and you're not quite sure of the level of technical questions you may get in an interview. I would tell you the best approach is to just go through interview prep just like you would be interviewed at any of the top tech companies in the world. It will make you a better developer at the end of the day. It will help you prepare in case you do get either recruited or do get a chance to do an interview with one of these companies. And there's a lot of companies in between, especially lately, that do incorporate technical interviews more than they ever have. So, and on top of everything else, it'll help you as an interviewer as well. So to be better prepared for the interview, you need to feel comfortable, and feeling comfortable will help you interview better. You'll be able to connect better with the interviewer. You won't sound nervous. You'll be able to remember the things that we so often forget when we're nervous, or we're thinking about too many things at the same time. But sounding confident and being comfortable in your own skin goes a very long way in standing out. I noticed the idea here is you want to stand out in these interviews, and it's very hard nowadays. But being comfortable in an interview and sounding, like your salt worth of the programming language that you're working on and how to solve tough problems, it will go a very long way. So what are the resources that I used? So I know these are still big, and at the time they were still upcoming. Cracking the Coding Interview, obviously, it's a very large book with a lot of problems written in Java. I would suggest if you're going to read any book, that's probably the best one to read for interview prep, I would suggest learning Java. It's very similar to C Sharp, which I know is taught at TTA. I'm actually not sure is Java taught at TTA as well. If it is, great. If not, it's not as big of a jump as you may think it is. It's very similar to C Sharp. And then I personally used MeCode and LeetCode. MeCode is just like LeetCode, but it has a YouTube element, and there's some cool courses set up, and it's a little bit more laid back, but goes over a lot of the data structures and common problems that you would see. I would consider LeetCode more of measuring your performance, and for me, MeCode was more of actually learning the material, because MeCode has a video tied to every single question with a full explainer, which is like worth its weight in gold. However, my standout that I used was something called AlgoExpert. If you're not familiar, AlgoExpert was started by an ex-Google, ex-Facebook employee, Clement. He actually has a YouTube channel. I think it's just his name, Clement Mehayu or something along those lines. If you search AlgoExpert Clement, you'll find his YouTube. He's also pretty big on LinkedIn. And he built this product from the ground up to help new software developers learn how to interview. He offers many products, whether that's regular technical interviews, system design, infrastructure, I think is a new one that they're doing. Even for front end focused engineers, they have a course on the front end. I thought that is a paid service. About $130 to $150, and you have it for the year. You can do monthly, but it's more expensive if you do monthly. But I would highly suggest giving AlgoExpert a try. AlgoExpert takes all the things on the left, all of the best things on the left, and packages them up into one nice, neat package. I probably would suggest, if you don't want to do anything on the left, you could just do AlgoExpert. So AlgoExpert allows you to learn via instructional video. So every question shows multiple approaches to how to answer, whether that is because the question has different time complexities, or there's just a cool different approach that you can use, maybe a functional programming approach versus an object-oriented programming approach. And it takes all of the wisdom that I found in cracking the coding interview and outlines that. The other great thing about AlgoExpert is it has a great community, and it's a really cool feature where you could request to do a mock interview. So you say you're ready and you want to do a mock interview towards the end, they will pair you up with another AlgoExpert user, and one person will be the interviewer, one will be the interviewee, and you can switch back and forth, and you can do this multiple times. So AlgoExpert is definitely the resource that I would push forward as the one that helped me the most my interview, and was something, it is to this day something that I highly suggest for other interviewers. So looking back on my interview prep, kind of like my countdown schedule, I started studying January of 2021. At that point, I had gone through the boot camp, I had gotten my first job, and I wanted to focus on this thing called algorithms and data structures. I knew I needed to focus on that because any interviews that I would have looking forward over the course of the next year or two, I would need to know these things. So starting at 6 months out, let's say, I read the book, and I went through the book, and it took me a good 3 to 4 months to go through the book and go through each problem. Now, I didn't work on this 20 hours a day. I only took about 2 hours a day, and I did maybe 2 to 3 problems at a time. And it wasn't to a point where I understood these problems back and forth. A lot of it was understanding Java in the first place. However, you pick it up very fast. I had familiarity with C# from the Tech Academy. I looked up a couple of videos on Java in general, and everything else was very straightforward from there. But I would rate my confidence at a 0 at this point. I mean, I wasn't confident to go into interviews, but at least I had an idea of what the type of questions are going to be asked, the bar that I would need to be brought up to. And at the time, I was applying to 1 or 2 applications for jobs. And this is only about 2 months after starting my first full-time job. It's not that I didn't like Braille. I just wanted to make sure that all of my opportunities were in front of me. And going into the spring, you'll find a lot of opportunities for companies looking to hire going into the summer and the new school year. Obviously, it's industry specific, but that's what I found was a good approach. So I did that, let's say 3 months, and now I'm 3 months out from interviews that I expect to maybe have over the summer. And this is where I found Algo Expert. And I would say you should maybe work on this 4 hours a day. And I naturally did just work on it 4 hours a day because I enjoyed it so much. But uh, I may have worked on it more than 4 hours a day, actually, now that I think about it. And it's helped me raise my confidence a lot. Um, I would say up to a 3 on this scale. So um, I started applying to more applications. You'll see I have about 10 applications a day at this point. I'm getting a much better grasp of the problems. I chose JavaScript as my language in my interviews, and I was actually able to tie the questions being asked in JavaScript back to the Crack the Coding interview Java questions. And that helped close the loop on a lot of questions that I maybe didn't initially understand from the read. So I do that for another 2 months, and now I'm at where I'm working pretty much a full-time job. My full-time job on top of Braille. I'm working Braille at night, and I'm vested heavily. At this point, I do know that I have interviews with Google and Amazon and a couple other companies. I interview with two other medium-sized, let's say, no-name companies, uh, and um, and I'm working on interview prep 8 hours a day around my normal job. I am handling my normal job, and interestingly, every once in a while, there may be a function or a method that you need to write that relates back to something that you learn. Um, and it's really interesting to see where you could apply some of these things in your normal everyday code. So that was interesting and kind of helped me keep up my excitement about the material itself. But I was using Algo Expert with Neat and LeetCode at this point. I was well advanced into the Algo Expert timeline and their course, and I was going back to Neat and LeetCode to kind of give myself a measure of where I was competitively in LeetCode and just informationally using Neat code. I would put my confidence at this point to a 4. And I had about maybe 20 applications a day going out. At this point, I had racked up maybe, and this is not every day when I say applications, but what I mean by that is if you're going to do applications that day, this is how many I did. So I had about 250 applications out at this point, even with my Google and Amazon interviews, just to put the odds in my favor. I do like, there's a saying out there, well, make your own luck. And I do like that a lot. I do believe that luck is a component of a lot of what happens in life, but you could absolutely uh, make yourself walk into better luck. I do also full-heartedly believe that as well. And when I say my confidence is a 4, I'm not saying that I'm gonna get the job, not even worried about it, but I'm saying that I'm confident doing what I believe these interviews are trying to filter through. And I'll discuss that a little more in the interviewing section, but um, I was able to talk to some people who worked at Google before my interviews and got some really good insights into what is actually looked at during an interview, the things that are spoken about during the hiring committee meetings after your interviews and your on-sites and even your phone screens. So that is the scale that I'm referring to, and I'll share those insights with you today. And then the week of, I continued working my full-time job of at Braille and my full-time job of studying. But I switched a little bit. I switched over to behavioral mostly with some technical prep. The technical prep that I worked on at this point were kind of some loose odds and ends. I would look at maybe some famous algorithms. Uh, I would uh, I would go over anything that I was a little bit iffy on. I would focus on understanding big O notation and how to walk through a problem and explain a problem's time and space complexity. Um, and I would just raise my confidence up to a 5 at this point because now I've incorporated the behavioral aspect. And I was any day that I sat down and said I'm going to do applications, I would be doing at least 20 applications. When I had my offer from Amazon to start August 15th, I had over 300 applications It was at like 326, something along those lines total from when I had started back in January. So that's interviewing prep. There isn't much more to say about prep. Obviously, there are many resources out there, and if you find one that you feel is really clicking with you, I'm not going to tell you not to use it. Absolutely. You might find a diamond in the rough out there that we're not aware of. But those are the ones that definitely helped me and that I have found helped a lot of other people. Uh, I think a lot of people are aware of interview prep in general. The one big takeaway that I will tell you from interview prep, and I'm sure you've heard this before, um, but it's not about memorization, right? There is a memory component. You do need to have certain things memorized, and that's just, straightforward. You need to know what data structures exist. You need to know that there's a thing called a queue or a stack or a trie and a tree, and what a graph is and things like that. But how to utilize these data structures to solve complex problems, if you're gonna use a brute force memorization approach, you're probably gonna fail. And you're probably gonna fail because when you conduct your interview, you're going to come across like you memorized the solutions. And that is not what these interviews are looking for. The end goal of an interview, a technical interview, is not to get the question in as fast as you can with the perfect answer using a really cool approach that no one's seen before. Um, that's not what they're looking for. I mean, if you could do these things, that's wonderful. But I rather take my time and walk through a problem like the interviewer is a colleague, and let them in on my thought process and how I solve some of these complex problems. Um, One of the big questions that you want to ask yourself is, if I'm the interviewer interviewing myself, would I want to work with me? And that's a little bit of a hard question to ask. It takes a little bit of self-reflection. I would definitely suggest asking it all the time while you're studying, while you're prepping, during your behavioral studies, especially. But this goes a very long way. Um, so just complete transparency, I didn't answer my phone screen question with Google, and I was invited for onsite. So there's a common myth that if you don't get this right, you blew it, you're done. It's not at all. I did very well in my Google phone screen. It was a tough breadth first search graph problem, and I was blanking, but I was able to explain the difference between breadth first search and depth first search, and I couldn't figure out one or two parts of the question. But that didn't stop me because I was able to lay out a plan and go through each step systematically with the interviewer. I was very communicative with what I was stuck on and my thought processes and going down different paths, maybe why one path might be better than the other. And naturally, the interviewer, not every interviewer will be like this, but a lot will. The interviewer will you what they really want to have, and they start to take on the role and follow, and if you start to notice them speeding up, if you can without you asking for help, that's a great I mean, actually like with that question of do I want to work with this person, is being answered in real time. They are naturally with if you're able to give them insight into where you may be struggling and they may be able to help. And that goes a really long way. So I had great rapport with my phone screen, and I was called back for Google Onsite. I did tidy up before onsites. Onsites are a little bit of a different beast altogether. You want to do your best during onsites, but as far as first impression go and phone screening, if you don't know the answer to a question or you completely blank, it is worth more instead of sitting there racking your brain for the solution. It is actually worth more to make sure that you're communicating well and refocusing on starting from the beginning and going through all of your steps. So the actual interview itself. Um, so the interview itself, there's a couple things you need to know. Obviously, you need to know your fundamentals. I listed the main ones here, but any interview prep site worth its salt will have all of those available to you, and we'll go through those. Algo Expert goes through all of these. I did rank them: depth first search, breadth first search, uh, graphs, all data structures, but graphs specifically, recursion, and big O are crucial things that you will need to know for technical interviewing. A lot of the medium questions that get asked during phone screen and on sites are graph questions, and probably an unproportional amount. So it's good to focus on those at a certain point in your study, maybe a little bit more than a linked list or reordering a try or something like that. So, and then of course, search algorithms like bubble sort and merge sort, dynamic programming, even basic linear algebra and permutations, combinatorics, and some famous algorithms. You can look into these things. I would say have a very surface knowledge of them, where you could just give a very brief definition and an explainer. You don't have to go too deep into these things unless you're going for a more advanced role, maybe an L5, L6, L7. But as an L3 at Amazon or an L4, L5, Amazon and Google, these are the things that I would focus on for your interview prep. Big O, just one thing about Big O. So you can memorize Big O for all the different problems, but you're gonna fall into the same trap where if you forget it, you're out of luck. And if you just immediately answer like that, the interviewer knows that it was just a memorized answer, a canned answer. So what I did actually during my Google interview is I went through and I figured out that the solution would have to be a breadth first search solution. And because it was a breadth first search solution, I knew based on the question that it had to go through I had to use certain data structures. And because of that, I knew what my time and space complexities, and I would lay this all out during the interview. So I was able to actually come to the time and space complexities by speaking about the problem itself and how to solve this and how I would solve it. And solving it this way would allow me to get a specific time and space complexity. And even more so than getting it right, that goes a really long way. Because even if you don't get it exactly right, the interviewer now knows that you're able to take complex solutions, organize the thoughts in your head, approach things systematically, and come to a conclusion based on data and knowledge that makes sense. And that goes a very long way. Besides knowing your fundamentals, though, you want to make sure you're speaking your mind. And this is the biggest thing during interviewing. So when you first start an interview, whether it's a phone screen or an on-site, and just so people are aware, if you've never done a phone screen and or on-site, there's really no difference between the two anymore. They used to fly you out maybe in the mid 2010s, but they don't really do that anymore. It's cost-saving measure and since COVID, of course. But there's really no difference between a phone screen and an on-site interview anymore. The level of questions I think you will get asked in both will range between, above average, easy, medium, to above average, medium. And you will only get hard questions if you're going for a higher level, for 95% of the questions that you would get asked. But getting back to speaking your mind, so the way that I was taught to approach interviewing is using these using these five approaches. So you want to start your interview by repeating the question that gets asked. You want to make sure that you're checking for understanding. It's such a trap to get caught where you think you heard the question and you end up answering it correctly, but you're not answering the question that was asked. And that's a very big red flag, where even if you did everything else perfect, you could be brought from a strong hire to maybe like a weak no hire. It can bring you down a whole order of magnitude on their scales. So you want to start with a plan on how to approach the problem, how to solve and test the problem. And during this planning phase is when you'll re-ask the question. And I wrote everything down with comments in the code editor. So I restated the question on a basic, very level, And then I wrote down what I believe I needed to answer. So how do I get from starting point to ending point by the fastest possible route without touching a bomb, let's say, something like that, on a 2D array. Let's take that example. So I want to make sure, and then I would say, is this what you would like me to solve today? And do that checking for understanding. The next thing I would write down is here are three possible approaches to serve a graph problem. And I would go through and I would speak out loud why I would choose option A. And then getting into the approach of how to solve using option A and the first approach. Let's say it's a breadth first approach. So you talk about how you need to create your temporary variables and how you need to make sure that you're not doing depth first search, you're doing breadth first search, yada, yada, yada. And I haven't even started the problem yet. This is me literally just typing comments at the top of the file. And then I put make sure to test using, these inputs, 1,5, 2,0, and space-time complexity. And it literally gives you almost like a preface to the question. It lists everything out. It's very programmatic. It's something actually that goes a long way. And it gets you into the interview. It helps you refocus, maybe help get over your nerves a little bit. You're checking for understanding so you don't fall into that trap. And it sets off a good starting point with the interviewer. As you go through your interview and you follow your plan, you want to constantly check for auditory cues. So make sure you speak out loud. Get cues from your interviewer. You're not in person, so you can't really do body language cues, but you want to check via auditory cues, that they understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. Ask things like, uh, do you believe using a breadth first search approach makes sense over a depth first search approach? I believe it does because X, Y, Z. Does that sound like that makes sense? Or did that comment make sense? Or do you understand the approach that I'm using? So you're not asking, should I solve it this way? But you're asking more, I'm going to solve it using X, Y, Z. Does that make sense to you? Does Are the things that I am saying getting across? And if you're getting positive feedback, continue. If you're getting negative feedback, then that's a sign that maybe your approach might be a little bit off. You want to kind of reset and check. Make sure you re-ask the question for the question to make sure that you're approaching the correct solution, and then go through the process once over. More than likely, you either miss something or you just have to think about your approaches a little bit different. If you do need time to think, and we all do, just make sure you ask for it. You want to avoid awkward silences. That is a red flag. It is something on the rubric. Awkward silences. Even if you need a full 2 minutes, which is a long time for silence if you haven't asked for it. Just make sure you ask for it first and get that verbal confirmation. Hey, do you mind if I take a couple of minutes just to think? And 99.9% of the time, an interviewer will absolutely give you that. Write what you know. So as you get into solving the problem, there's a couple of ways to approach it. You want to get down what you know right away, because you don't want to have to utilize your mental aptitude to try to just remember things that you already know. And getting them down quickly also reduces the risk of you forgetting it a minute later, because we all do have mental blocks. So if you know you're going to attempt a problem using a certain approach, what you could do is almost pseudocode the approach, and you could say that. Say, I'm going to get down the things that I know, and then work backwards on the things I might have a little bit more of a harder time with, and I think I'll be able to get there using that approach. Does that sound okay with you? Something along those lines. And get all that down, and the things that you're more comfortable with, that you know the details of. If you know there's a specific method that you're going to utilize, then actually write out that method. Don't write pseudocode, write the actual code. Write down your variables that you'll need, things of that nature. And then if there's any areas of your approach that you're not familiar with, or you're blanking on, or you're not too sure about, that's where you'll put your pseudocode, where you'll put maybe comments like, here would be a variable that would take input from method A and input into method B because we need to output an array that looks like this, like something along those lines. And then as you work through your problem, you'll be able to use your context and you'll be able to piece together the different parts. And, you solve everything around the part that you're having a hard time with. You're greatly reducing the number of variables that go into figuring out what is required to solve the abstract the part that is more ambiguous. And of course, you want to have fun. So having fun in the sense that you want your interviewer to know that you're having fun. This is a great opportunity to be in a phone screen and in an on-site interview. You want to show them your enthusiasm for development, for coding. Even during behavioral interviews, the excitement behind being able to get results that directly relate back to a problem that a task that you had to solve. It goes a long way, and it feeds also into being confident. But having fun also helps you balance that confidence and make you appear more humble in nature. So this is my approach overall to interviewing. You notice here, none of the steps said get the answer right. And I'm a big proponent of that. I mean, you would love to get the answer right, and we all would. And if you do, that's a great thing. That box gets checked off, and it's not a flag that ends up on your assessment. But not getting the answer right while doing all of these things very well is also very likely to get you to the next step as well. So, and these things are sometimes more controllable than knowing the answer. Because if you forget something and you just can't remember it, there is nowhere else to go. So instead of just saying the same things over and over, looking back and focusing on these things is really important. For behavioral interviewing, I'm a big proponent of the STAR method. The STAR method is situation, task, action, result. What I would say is going into behavioral interviewing, you want to have 1 to 2 stories ready to go that you could tie back to different principles. Times that you had to maybe dispute a difference between 2 employees, or name a time where an employee directly was directly opposed to maybe your suggestion, and you ended up going with someone else's suggestion that ended up being better than yours, and like things like that, right? Is what I mean by principles. We do have things called uh, so Amazon has leadership principles, which are tied loosely to these, but in this specific case, I don't mean specifically leadership principles. If you do end up interviewing at Amazon, these would be the principles you would focus on. But whatever company you're interviewing for, if they have listed principles, then that's what you would use. Otherwise, you would use generic principles. So having 1 to 2 stories ready to go, stories that you can practice ahead of time. Use the STAR method. So you need to, when you use the STAR method, it's important that you focus on yourself. We all want to give our teams credit and show how good of team players we are, but that's not the idea of the STAR method. And there's a reason behind that, because the interviewer doing the behavioral interview wants to know how you made a difference. It's great that you're a team player, and it's great that you're able to work on a team. And those things are evident by working on a team, but they want to know the value that you will bring to their team, not necessarily that you can just work on one. So you want to make sure you focus on you and not necessarily the team. You don't want to say you did it all by yourself despite a team, right? But you do want to make sure that most of what you talk about is focused on the things that you did. And it's really important to make sure the task is clearly laid out, right? So here's a situation. This is what we needed to do. This is why it was a problem. It needed this type of answer, right? And then explain your action. And then the most important part of the STAR method is when you explain your result, you want to make sure you bring tangible results. We were able to increase sales 12% year over year, which directly solved our need to hit our year-end goal, which was the original task that we were assigned. So you want to close the loop. The result should always directly answer the task that you speak to, and making it tangible with actual data, hard facts is the best approach, and by far um, will keep you from having to do word salads or fluff and things like that. And those things are easily picked out by seasoned behavioral interviewers. I'm always a big proponent of saying less with more. So having your stories thought through well before the interview will help you narrow down the things you do and do not need to talk about. Each story should take no longer than 2 to 5 minutes tops. If you feel yourself rambling on for 10 minutes on a story, it's probably good to bring it back in. You need to leave time for other stories and questions. The interviewer does have lots of questions and a certain amount of questions they would like to get answered during the interview. So having them between 2 and 5 minutes is a good middle ground where you're able to apply the STAR method uh, to show how the results directly related back to the task and the actions that you took, and to allow time for the rest of the interview. You want to be polite and humble, of course. You want to show the interview that you can balance your confidence and your communicative skills along with being someone who's humble and appreciative, and always be kind to interviewers. These are people that actually, want you to do well. The better you do, the more people that they interviewed have a better chance of getting hired, and that's actually a good thing for an interviewer. And then follow up. Don't be nervous at the end to voice follow up concerns, right? So ask what the next steps are, ask for specifics. Say, what are the expectations at this point? Is there a certain date that I will hear an answer by? Are there any timelines that I need to be aware of? Be excited for the opportunity, and mention you can't wait to hear back. If there's any time for questions, maybe have 1 or 2 questions lined up, something you find that you would love answered from anybody working in the field. If it's a behavioral interview, whether a technical position, it's better to ask technical questions. And if it's more like a product manager or an SDM, like a development manager, then maybe it's better to ask more of questions related to culture. So it's good to always have questions as well. So summary, we went over a lot. Interviewing can be intimidating, so let's just review what we went over. So prep, right? So it's very well ended to be a full-time job on top of your actual full-time job. But the investment is well worth the return that you would get for landing a job. So you do want to memorize the basics, things like your data structures and the difference between breadth first search and depth first search, and what time and space complexity means. But you want to develop a deeper understanding for why different approaches work versus others in certain scenarios. These are your comprehension skills for reading questions and understanding the answers that these questions are looking for. Uh, as you progress, you want to turn up the heat of your prep. Start doing timed interviews. This is why I love Algo Expert, because they do have the mock interview sessions, and it just does all of this for you automatically. So I'm a big proponent of that. During the interview, speak your mind. Write down your plan. Make sure it's clear and it's in an understandable way. Make sure that you're asking for understanding from your interviewer along the way. You want to be mindful of your tone, but it's good to be confident while showing how you balance being humble at the same time. And those things are handled at different parts of the interview, right? You could be confident while solving and humble while talking or answering behavioral questions, or questions in the beginning or at the end, right? Uh, and then you want to connect with your interviewer. So this is a really good approach. If you're able to have some insight into who will be interviewing you, whether if you know the person, great, then you could do some research and figure out some things that you want to talk about. If you know just the position of who will be interviewing you, that's good too, because it'll help you have those questions you want to ask lined up. It'll help you maybe approach how you speak a little bit differently. But you want to do as much research into the company itself at the very least, if you don't know who will be interviewing you, just so you could ask relevant questions to that company. Something like leadership principles is actually public knowledge. It's not that everyone knows it, but it is available to the public. So going into an Amazon interview, it's great to ask, about those leadership principles. How are they applied? Are these seriously used, you know, throughout your career at Amazon, things like that. And then I have here listed the resources that I suggest: LeetCode, NeetCode, and Algo Expert. So that is the session. I wanted to open up time towards the end for questions. I'm not sure if there are any in the chat. I'll hand it back over to Brandon.
Yes, thanks, Scott. That was awesome. Really appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat here. It looks like we have one from Shabbat. He is asking, he's saying, cracking the code interview and leak code both seem very dense. Is Algo Expert the same?
So I do I do uh I do agree that it's dense, but if you can give yourself the time that can be spread out, I would highly suggest doing both if you have the time. If you don't have the time, then I would focus just on either LeetCode and or Algo Expert. Algo Expert to me, to answer the second part of your question, was kind of the best of all worlds because what cracking the coding interview did for me is it gave me a great introduction into how to think about some of these more complex problems. This is written by an ex-Googler who gives really good insights into why we solve certain technical problems in certain ways and how to apply time and space complexity. But it's not required. It's not that if you don't do all the things on the left, that you're not going to pass. You could do none of the things that I showed, have a different resource entirely. If you have the time, I would still suggest you do all of them. Just space them out and start slow, maybe 2 hours a day, maybe only during the week or something like that. And then ramp up as you get more and more comfortable. Uh, you'll also notice that as you get more and more comfortable, you'll be able to work through these things much faster. And you'll be able to gain more confidence by working through them faster. And remember, as you go through your interview prep, you do want to start being able to answer these things quicker. That's why timing yourself and maybe within the last month is so important. If you find that you're still struggling or still lacking in speed a little bit, then maybe refocusing on general understanding is the best approach. But do all if you can, as long as you're doing something that's good. Space it out based on your own, your own personal preference. So
Right on. Good to know. Lewis is asking, what tier did you purchase for Algo Expert?
so the tier was, let me pull it up real quick. I think I have it. So it was the full software developer. Let's see. Oh, expert IO. Yeah, so I purchased just the standard Algo Expert, just the regular Algo Expert. They also have like Systems Expert and Infra Expert. I just purchased the Algo Expert 1 year membership, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
I hope so. Yes.
Okay, cool.
All
Thank you.
good. We've got a question here from Kevin. He's asking, what do you think about HackerRank?
HackerRank is interesting. To me, HackerRank is more competitive. It's definitely a lot of fun. I didn't include it. I have used HackerRank. There are some companies that will ask for your HackerRank if you have one. Um, what I would say to that is it's great if you have a high HackerRank. That's a great sign. But remember what 95% of companies are looking for are people that they're excited to work with and have the technical aptitude to learn new things, and are passionate about this field. So while having a high hacker rank is a great thing, it's not a true testament to the type of developer you are, or maybe uh how well of a colleague you may be. Um, to me, if I had a company that won't accept uh, an interview without a hacker rank, and I didn't have a hacker rank, I would forego that interview completely. That would be a little bit of a red flag to me. If they're asking for a hacker rank and it's completely optional, then sure. But I would make sure that you're focusing on understanding the material more, especially towards the beginning, than just trying to get your rank up. Hacker rank in and of itself is a fun thing, but you want to make sure you're focusing on the things that help you get past the next round in the interview. And there's a lot of things besides just answering the questions in a really uh, in the fastest possible way to get you there. So just keep that in mind.
Good to know. Steph's asking a follow-up question on that. She's asking, when you get a hacker rank type test, have you found a way to share your thought pattern? Would it be via a follow-up email?
Um, it's probably the best approach. Yeah, um, it doesn't hurt to always send a company an email. I mean, the worst thing they could do is just not respond. It shows, it does show tenacity. It shows that you're interested in this field and that you have a passion to share what you really love and to do. So I would say absolutely you could do that. Um, and of course in that email, make sure you include things about how excited you are for the opportunity, how excited you are to have such an interesting question. This is why I thought the question was so interesting. So it doesn't have to be like, because you don't want to be submitting a second interview through an email, right? You want to make sure that your actual, if that's what they're doing, then you want to make sure that they're using the HackerRank test itself to be the performance for your interview and not your follow-up email. You want your follow-up email to help you, not hurt you. So just be careful how much you go into depth in the follow-up email. But definitely high level approach and why you did something a certain way, it not hurt.
Fantastic. We've got a question from Lawrence here. He's asking, what's the current tech stack at Amazon? Did you know these technologies before starting, or did you learn those stacks after you started the job? For example, are they publicly known libs, frameworks such as React, Angular, Node, or something internal?
It's a little bit of both. So we use React in Amazon org for front end. And we do write in Java for backend. There are some internal languages that we use for infrastructure, and there are a lot of internal tools that we use. Um, so we use a flavor of GitHub, not exactly GitHub. We have our own version of, I'm sorry, a flavor of Git that ties into Git. We have our own version of GitHub that we use, and these are all based on security concerns and um, uh, proprietary software and things of that nature. But we use React and Java mostly for front and back end development. But lots of languages are used throughout Amazon. I know Rust is very fast and upcoming. Uh, there is a mobile development arm within Amazon advertising for the Seller Central app, and they're using Swift and React Native. Um, I would say the most widely used language is JavaScript and TypeScript at Amazon as a whole. Um, as far as the stack goes, I can't get into too much detail about things like our data and backend. But as you can imagine, we use some flavor of AWS. So
Fantastic. I had a question. So you work for Braille. I'm actually watched a bunch of their videos when I was a lot longer and used to be a huge fan. What was it like to work for them?
it was great. It was a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Aaron is the character for sure, and Devin, their COO at the time, was amazing. Uh, So actually, going back to the last question and answering your question at the same time, did I know the technologies going into Amazon? I knew them going into Amazon, but I didn't know them going into Braille. And Braille's not a technical company. They're a skateboarding company that sells merchandise. They're an e-commerce, right? And entertainment company. Uh, so I didn't have a technical interview with Braille. My interview with Braille was it's December 15th. Our app is half finished and broken and being rejected by Apple. They're trying to get it on the App Store. Um, and it's being rejected because if you have user logins, you need to allow users to block other users. That's one of the guidelines to having an app with logins for the Apple Store. If you could fix our app and get it approved by January 1st, you got the job. So that was my technical interview. It was a 2 week long interview. I was working primarily alone at the time because utilizing um, they were utilizing contract developers and they weren't always readily available. Um, so not only was I getting used to a new code base, I was also learning React and going through the specific issues that they were having with Apple. Uh, Needless to say, it was sink or swim, and I was able to pick up the things that I learned from the Tech Academy about JavaScript, and thankfully I had a good understanding of Git and source control to be able to save my butt whenever I messed up royally. There was a lot of times that I shouldn't have committed or I reset things and lost things, and I was able to get back to it. But yeah, so uh, that's as far as technology goes and like how I interviewed at Braille. But it was amazing. I was glad I got to work to build their app website back then and on their Shopify from the ground up. That was really exciting, and it probably helped serve me very well for interviewing at Amazon.
Glad to hear that. So cool. Are you okay if we do two more questions here?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. So we've got Kevin's asking a follow-up. He's saying that he's currently or has enrolled in the software developer bootcamp at TTA recently. He's asking for any advice you would give for someone wanting to starting out.
Absolutely. I always give people the same answer to this question. Make sure you have as much time as possible to do. Let me ask you before I answer that. Is it? Oh, thank you. This is Jack, everybody. Hi. You want to say hi real quick? Hi. Say hi, Jack. Say hi. Can you wave? Wave. Thank you. Hi. Go to mommy. Show mommy the slinky. Here. Sorry about that, everybody. Um, I would are they still called what do they call at the end of the year? The projects that you complete on the team.
Capstone projects.
What is it?
Capstone.
Capstone. Yes. Okay. Give as much possible time as you can for as many capstones as you can do. At the time, we were doing up to two sprints over the course of a month. If you can give yourself extra time and complete your bootcamp, the learning portion quick enough, you may have extra time at the end to do multiple capstones. Obviously, something you get approved by your instructors, higher ups, but you want to remember that it is your boot camp. You want to get the most out of it that you can, and you get so much knowledge and experience from these capstone projects. It don't apply everything you learned throughout the year into one nice neat bow at the end, and a lot of things tend to click. You're also able to get a good feeling of where you are technically doing your capstone, and how that is portrayed through working on a team. Um, it really allows you uh to give you some sort of path forward with things that you need to work on, whether it's source control or just understanding the language better, or you nailed it. Because if you do really well, or you have experience doing one and then can do really well on the second one, then you're going to get noticed. And that's probably why I got the offer from Braille. I was able to do a capstone project And most of the capstone projects really didn't have much styling to them. It was really just getting something to work. But I put a lot of extra time really late at night, putting a ton of styling in and making it look really nice using some design elements that I found online from Google called Material Theme and made it really, really cool looking. And that stood out, and it was something that got noticed by my instructor and got sent out as an email. And then when Aaron came to the owner, Eric of um, of the TTA and asked for a developer that he thought he would do well, my name came up because I had been noticed. So, definitely put time, as much time as you can into those. Utilize those capstones. They're really worth their weight in gold, and it also helps you understand where you are as a developer as well. So that was my one piece of advice.
Good to know. Awesome. Lawrence has one final follow-up question to his previous one about the technologies in Amazon. He's asking, did you know these technologies before? Did it help you to get the interview, or was just being a good problem solver give
I
you the
found out.
time?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. He's just basically asking, was it helpful to know the technologies before, or was it better to be a good problem solver and be able to learn them?
I mean, if you know the technologies before, they may help you. One of my interviews at Amazon told me I could solve a problem using either React or native JavaScript. But I knew that I was applying for an FEE role, and that was going to be focused on front-end technologies. So whether it was utilizing React or JavaScript or TypeScript, I had made sure that I was comfortable with all of those before going into it, the interviews. Uh, and especially if you're going in as more of a junior, right? Just an L4 role, you're not going to get overly complex problems. You shouldn't be given overly complex problems where you have to worry too much about HTTPS protocol and load balancing and all of these other things. Um, if you're going as an SDE, it's going to be the fundamentals of object-oriented programming. Obviously, you need to know Java or Rust or whatever language you decide to use, but Java is used mostly at Amazon. If it's for front-end engineer, you want to make sure that you understand the DOM, and you want to make sure that you understand latency and how to reduce page latency and different techniques like gzip and that you could utilize. And obviously, you want to understand JavaScript and all of the methods and functions available within JavaScript. Don't forget um, to study JavaScript classes. A lot of people just look at functional programming in JavaScript. Sometimes you have to use a class, and there are lots of classes written in Amazon's code. So it's good to also learn some of the original object-oriented programming aspects to JavaScript as well. Uh, I would suggest learning TypeScript if you can, but definitely JavaScript.
Fantastic. Scott, thank you so much for the time. This was an awesome presentation you gave us. If you guys are interested in learning more about the bootcamp that Scott took, I'll put a link to that in the chat for you guys. But other than that, thank you so much, Scott.
Yeah, thank you. And if anybody wants to reach out on LinkedIn, it's just you can look me up, Scott Katzelnick. I will grab let me grab my LinkedIn, um, like my actual like link, and then I'll let you we'll share that. But if anybody wants to connect, I'm more than happy to connect, especially for um any folks that are coming from the TTA, it's always a soft spot. So let me put that in the chat for everybody. And then feel free to reach out. And if you have any questions, obviously, um, let me know, and I'll do my best to answer them, of course. Thank you for having me. I always love coming to PTA sessions. So thank
Of
you.
course, love hearing all the successes. Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.